It's great to see people gathering. Looks like we've got just a couple of minutes before we begin our presentation. So I'm doing a final voice test. It looks like everybody can hear. And we will be using, of course, our speakeasy text as well. And we'll get started in just a minute. I will mention that this presentation is from the Community Virtual Library, and all three of us work at the Community Virtual Library here in Second Life, as well as other virtual worlds, such as Kitely, Avacon, and web-based worlds like Cyber Lounge and 3D Web Worlds, as well as exploring some virtual reality desktop web worlds like Sansar and AltSpace. And we'll be telling you a little bit about these various virtual worlds as we go along with our presentation. All right, looks like it's time to begin, so welcome. You're at the presentation of virtual VR and virtual worlds, one and the same. We're going to contemplate that question today. What's a little bit about distinguishing those worlds? I'm Dr. Valerie Hill, Director of the Community Virtual Library in Second Life, and as I said, in some other virtual worlds. And my colleagues, Elise Donovan-Jones and Dr. Marie Vans, will introduce themselves during the presentation as we go along. We've been utilizing virtual worlds for education in libraries for years, but now we're expanding our research to include virtual reality. So my own background is in library science and education, and it centers on digital culture. The revolutionary changes taking place in both classrooms and in libraries led to my research in virtual environments, just like many of you here today. Alongside Elise and Marie, I've recently been visiting VR spaces, and our goal today is to address this problem. The relationship between virtual reality and virtual worlds is fraught with contradictions and misconceptions. And VR and 3D virtual world educators are often isolated from each other. And this lack of understanding, lack of clear definitions, and lack of communication has led to poor digital citizenship and redundant efforts. So our main research question today is, what are virtual worlds as they relate to virtual reality? And how can virtual reality and 3D virtual world educators combine their efforts? Virtual worlds have been used by educators for over a decade, but many people, as you all know, still have never even heard of them. Virtual reality is just beginning to be used by educators, but there are so many limitations. The limitations include lack of content that's educational. It's difficult to build. There are just no tools for the users, so it's not exactly user-generated content like we can have here. So this journey into virtual worlds and virtual reality, VR, it's really emphasized the need for digital citizenship at all ages. It is now a personal responsibility for everybody. Educators are responsible for choosing the best tool for the job, for teaching. It's a personal responsibility for all of us to evaluate the consuming and producing of resources. It's a personal responsibility for us to use technology ethically and wisely, and understanding of privacy, security, respect for intellectual property, all of those are fairly new skills over the last few decades. And digital citizenship applies certainly to virtual reality and to virtual worlds. So today in this presentation, we hope to provide insight into why this is imperative. So for over 12 years, the Community Virtual Library has been an active hub for librarians, educators, and anyone really, people interested in virtual worlds for persistent learning spaces. Our main branch is right here in Second Life, but we also have a digital citizenship museum in Calongne. And later this month, we will share a tour for the Virtual Worlds Best Practices in Education 2019 conference and immersive experience of the Digital Citizenship Museum in Calongne, and I'll put a link to that tour here in the text chat. You can see the Digital Citizenship Museum on this slide. And you'll see the three of us in Calongne on the right, and the three of us, Elise, Maria, and myself, are now exploring desktop VR in Sansar. You can see a photo of that on the left. So what is the difference between virtual reality and virtual worlds? And there are a lot of people talking about that concept here at the conference. There are no clear definitions of VR. I'm finding over 100 definitions out there. There's a lot of misconceptions in trying to understand what it actually is. Some of the most common differences include virtual reality is typically thought to be experienced with a HMD, a head-mounted display that you wear on your head. And most of the content created for virtual reality is developed by content developers trained in special programs such as Unreal Engine or Unity. Very difficult to use. There are few opportunities for user-generated content in VR. Unlike what we can do here in Second Life, virtual worlds are built by the users themselves. Avatars embody a persistent space in a virtual world, and they enjoy a sense of presence, of being together in that environment. So a virtual world provides this sense of presence while still allowing a space between one's body and the computer screen. In other words, the person is mentally inside a virtual space, but they're well aware of the separation. The virtual reality has no separation of the virtual space because that headset blocks out the physical world view. This can cause issues for some people, especially if they have vision problems or other health problems. Lag issues are improving with virtual reality, although I personally have not really had any nausea or dizziness. I did have to wait 30 minutes to feel comfortable driving after a long VR experiment demo. Now here's another diagram that shows virtual reality as a label of the hierarchy, in which VR headsets present one way to experience a virtual space. And as you can see, virtual reality is often a first-person experience where one cannot see themselves or their avatar. In a virtual world, however, the individual can choose mouse look, but most often they simply view the avatar and the other avatars all immersed together in the experience. So VR is usually experienced with that HMD, as I mentioned, which could be an inexpensive Google Cardboard model that you can buy, cheap, very inexpensive, and you can insert a cell phone with a virtual reality app. Gaming systems are offering VR, and the three of us are now exploring desktop VR, and my colleagues are going to explain that shortly. Virtual worlds, they're currently accessed on desktop computers or on laptops. And of course, one has to have a pretty good graphics card, in order to utilize virtual worlds. So in this diagram, you can see that the three of us are leaning toward a hierarchy in which virtual worlds are a part of virtual reality. And for this reason, how you view the space is not as important as how real the space is for the purpose of learning. Reality is what you're perceiving in your mind. So you can see that it might be possible to view these experiences either in first person or in third person. A few common VR terms might be a world. That results when a mind has faith in the persistence of what it perceives. And a reality. A reality results when a mind has faith that other minds share enough of the same world to establish communication and empathy. Well, that sounds like a virtual world to me. That comes from Jaron Lanier's new book, Dawn of the New Everything, Encounters with Reality and Virtual Reality. And many people credit Jaron Lanier as being the father of virtual